Hello, this is Alessandra Manzur.
And Miriam Garcia. We're the acting cultural representatives for Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico became an official territory of the United States in 1917 and has gone through various periods of being pronounced either as an official Spanish speaking country or a bilingual territory. As of 1993, Puerto Rico is an official bilingual territory. However, currently only 20% of the population is fluent in English, with the rest of the population either having a limited use of English or none at all. Additionally, it's important to speak on the history of Puerto Rico because past cultural events have impacted the language used to this day. For example, the Spanish used in Puerto Rico takes after Southern Castilian Spanish, which was brought over during the Spanish colonization period. Due to this, Puerto Rico was later used as a slave trade port, with many African pronunciations seen in the language today.
Let's look at the language domain of phonology first and its variations in phonemes used by Puerto Ricans today. There are three distinct characteristics in the spoken sounds of R, D, and S. Regarding the R sound, it is always produced in the beginning of a word, but it's often omitted or converted into an L in the final position of a word. For example, Puerto Rico is pronounced as Puerto Rico. The transformation of R to L appears to have come from African influences on the island. Additionally, the R outside of the capital population of San Juan is often pronounced as a guttural R, where arroz will sound like ajo. This may have occurred due to the French influences from the French colonization period. The guttural R is very unique to Puerto Rico, as it's not seen in any other Caribbean Spanish-speaking countries. With D, it will often be silenced when the consonant is in between two vowels. For example, estado is produced as estao. Following, the S is frequently aspirated when spoken. For example, los dos is pronounced as los do. In the word pescado, which is fish, you will hear the S aspirated and the D dropped to sound as pecao. Lastly, whole syllabic word endings are often omitted in not only words, but phrases as well, such as para nada being pronounced as pana. We should keep in mind that in more formal settings, some of these patterns are reduced and a more mainstream Spanish is used. Some major notes for SLPs treating Puerto Ricans would be to look out for phonological variations, such as gliding, aspirated D, R, and S, and omission of unvoiced whole syllables. Remember, these are unique to their language system and not traits of disordered speech. Their influence and presence are expected in the L2. The lexicon used by Puerto Ricans has been influenced by a variety of cultures. For example, the Taínos, who are the native people of Puerto Rico, created words such as hurricane and hammock. In addition, most of the semantics used by Puerto Ricans come from mainstream Spanish. One sees similarities in lexical use with other Spanish-speaking Caribbean islands like the Dominican Republic. There are also more similarities with South American Spanish-speaking countries like Colombia than the Northern American and Central American countries like Mexico or Honduras.
Regarding grammar, there are some differences in syntax observed in the language that deviate from most Spanish-speaking countries, such as subject pronouns coming before the verb, like in ¿qué tú quieres?, where most Spanish languages would place the verb first and say ¿qué quieres tú? This seems to occur due to the heavy influence of English in Puerto Rico, where English also uses a subject-verb form. Additionally, adding more subject pronouns in an utterance is common, and this may be an attempt to reduce ambiguity in a conversation since the language is more lax on requesting a full pronunciation of a word or phrase. Studies have also noted Puerto Ricans have a preference of overt pronouns in speech like tú and yo, which again may function as a comprehension strategy for listeners. Consequently, priming is observed. Priming occurs when the initial speaker influences the way the pronouns will be used in the conversation, either overtly or covertly. Covert pronouns are the exact opposite of overt pronouns, where the pronouns are omitted from the majority of the conversation and only mentioned in the beginning of the conversation. For example, a priming of a verb pronoun sounds like this. Yo, bueno, alguna vez yo estaba caminando por Campes y yo versus priming covert pronouns, all the yo, I, will be omitted from the sentence except in the beginning like seen on the slide. Bilinguals show a preference of overt priming use over monolingual speakers. SLPs should be aware of these subtle grammatical differences in the language. However, these differences resemble more closely mainstream English form and may not be a major syntactic issue if treating in English.
Pragmatically, Puerto Ricans can be described as animated talkers as they like to enhance communication with hand gestures and body movements. Finishing off each other's thoughts isn't seen as rude, but as active participation in a conversation. Keep this in mind when working with someone of Puerto Rican descent, as their turn taking may not appear as norm, but in reality it's just a cultural difference. Dialect in Puerto Rico varies by region on the island, like in the use of the guttural R only outside of San Juan, as well as socioeconomic status and generation. The older generations have been noted to speak very differently from the younger generations in informal settings. Code switching is also integral to Puerto Rico, and it's accepted and used daily. Even non-fluent English speakers will use and comprehend staple English words and integrate it in their speech, such as saying, "Vamos pa'l mall."
Overall, Puerto Ricans are a friendly and polite people. Using frequent politeness markers is expected in the language, such as saying buen provecho to others when seen eating near you, or ensuring that every person is greeted upon arrival and departure in any social setting via verbalization of a greeting or a customary kiss on the cheek. Communication can also be more relajado, which means it can be informal when people are comfortable with each other, but even then, it's always important to keep an air of respect at all times. Family is an integral part of Puerto Rican culture, and nepotism is viewed as positive since it means the family is working together closely. As an SLP, make sure to frequently communicate with all members of the client's family. Also, make sure to make them feel that they are an integral part of the process for which they are most likely expecting to be involved in.
Because Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory, modern medicine is found throughout the island and attempts to keep up with mainland practices. Regarding apparel, some staple traditional wear often seen in festivals or carnivals by traditional dancers are the bomba skirt worn by women and the guayabera shirts worn by men, pictured here on the slide.
On this slide, you can see two pictures of two prominent Puerto Rican festivals that occur around the December-January nativity season. La Fiesta de Calle de San Sebastián and El Festival de Máscaras de Jaitillo both come from religious origins and celebrate various saints. As you can tell, Puerto Rico is an overall Catholic Christian community, and most holidays follow the typical Christian calendar. Food is an experience in Puerto Rico. Some of the most famous and typical food includes mofongo, lechon, arroz con gandules, and tembleque. These are consumed throughout the year and on special occasions as well.
Lastly, we'd like to touch upon the presence of Puerto Ricans in Miami. It's estimated that there are around 103,000 Puerto Ricans in Miami. While this is a large number, compared to other ethnic populations, such as Cubans, this number is relatively smaller. However, the fastest growing population of Puerto Ricans in the United States is in Central Florida, in cities such as Orlando and Jacksonville. This would be beneficial to remember in case you have an interest in practicing in those areas. There was a notable large migration of Puerto Ricans in 2018 to many states in the U.S. after Category 5 Hurricane Maria devastated the island in 2017. While stats show many Puerto Ricans have remained in the U.S., stats also show that many who migrated post-Maria have also returned back to the island, about 4.4% of the one-third who migrated.
We hope this information has helped you in becoming more aware of language variations you may expect to see in Puerto Rican people, as well as gaining knowledge on the overall culture. We believe this is useful information to keep in mind throughout your career, especially as working Florida SLPs. Thank you y adios.